Hello and welcome back to another tier list, this time with Chronicles of Gagana, the last current DLC set in the game. So we're finally going to cover this, and I'm going to break this one up into two different tier lists because there are a bunch of treasures released with this one. They deal with a lot of treasures, so we're going to do a separate tier list for all of the treasures, and then all of the non-treasure cards. These are only the treasure cards for the Chronicles of Gagana DLC that you can actually play in the base game, or in the, the normal ranked ladder. So I'm not covering any Pandora cards. And as always, if you don't know these cards by heart, by their images, I'll post a text-based tier list in the description as well. So let's get started. First guy up is Fugoro. By the way, a balance patch has happened between my last tier list video and this one, so some things have changed, like Husk has been nerfed, Fugoro here has been changed to a 2-leg creature, so I'll post the link to the balance patch in the description as well, just so you guys know what has happened between these two tier lists. But yeah, anyways, Fugoro, even with the buff to a 2-leg cost now, I still don't think it's very great. It's still a 5-cost 3/5, and like the buffs are nice, but only if you manage to pull a treasure, which is pretty terrible. So this is probably D. I mean, the stats aren't awful. It's like the same stat line as the blue Triton that has 3/5 and jump with event synergy, but I mean, the event synergy one is just better. It just gets the stats a lot more reliably, so I think we gotta slot this in D tier. This is the Message in a Bottle, which is actually a pretty great card in like event-based decks. It's 1 Faeria, draw a card, and then with event synergy, pretty great. And then you add 2 treasure maps in your deck, so again, adding some more events to your deck that are really easy to play. I think this is a pretty decent card. This is the turtle. I don't remember its name, but it's a 4/5 that draws you a card and adds a treasure map to your deck or something. This card's not very great, but we'll put it in C tier because, yeah, it's not awful, but it's not going to be in any meta decks or anything. But the stat line is okay, so we'll slot it in C tier. That seems fair enough. This is the Triton Stargazer, also a C tier. So this guy's, well, this might even be worse. It's very expensive. It's 5 cost, draws you 3 cards, which can have some synergy with like combo sort of decks with all of this card draw. In terms of like treasure map decks, I mean, treasure maps aren't a very good mechanic in the game. They're more of a meme. Most of the treasure map cards, there are some good ones, of course, but this guy's just really expensive. You can pair it up with Failed Experiment. If you're looking for combo decks, you can draw 3 cards with it, which is pretty nice. But it's not fantastic. This might even be a D tier. It's just, it's never going to be used. Like, it's used in the Ruby Yak OTK, which is not really a meta deck, but yeah, we might put it here for now. Might change my mind. So this is the... God, I don't even know the names of these cards because I never play them. But this guy is a 4/3, 4 cost with dash and jump. And if he ends his turn on an enemy land, you get to draw a card, which is reasonably okay. I think this is C tier actually. Again, he's usable, but not fantastic. A 4-cost 4/3 isn't the best. And you're not always going to be able to trigger this ability. Even if you do trigger the ability, you're putting him in a very vulnerable position just to draw the card. I mean, 4-cost 4/3 draw a card is okay, but the fact that you have to put this in such a vulnerable position to do so just makes it not so good. This guy is terrible. I honestly want to put this as a meme because it's so bad, but I guess you can use it. Yeah, we'll put it into D. So this guy is 4-cost. A 4-cost 2/2, and similar sort of ability as this, where if you step it on an enemy land, you buff all of friendly creatures around him. It's just really difficult to trigger, 2/2 body is really easy to answer. Forecast is a huge investment. Same downsides as this. You put it in a really vulnerable spot. And you're gonna get like one buff maybe off of this. So you have to make sure your creatures are set up on the enemy lands and such. Really difficult to set up, really difficult to pull off, really vulnerable target. The Ogre Adventurer is pretty solid. So yeah, this guy's interesting. Like I kind of want to slot him into A, but I think he's more of a B tier anyways. This is a 5 cost, 3 land card with -1. And if this ends its turn on an enemy land, you get to discount a random card in your hand by 1. So in a way, it's like a 4 cost 5/5, I guess, but not really. I mean, the random discount kind of hurts sometimes, but it's a pretty solid body, so I think B tier is pretty reasonable for it. This guy, God, I'm gonna have to search this guy up because I can't remember. Okay, so Keldran Adventurer has a 3 land requirement, 4 cost 4/3. Again, same thing as the blue Triton guy, except you shuffle 2 treasure maps in your deck. So this is pretty on par with this guy, but a little worse, just because this guy has jump. So yeah, we'll put him like right below him, pretty much the same ability. Exotic pet. This guy's great. So this guy's reasonable. He's 2 cost 3/2 with beast synergy. So I think it's pretty reasonable. We'll slot him there. The Kodama Beast Tender, I think this is more of a let's see. So this guy's 6 cost, 4 land, jump, and he gives 2 attack to beasts. He's a little bit expensive, like 6 cost and 4 land, that's quite pricey. And the effect is only okay. Like, you kind of got to chase down your other beasts to make this work. So I think we're going to slot him in a solid C tier there. I feel bad for Tiki Adventurer, all his friends are going ahead of him. Poor old guy. Yeah, so this DLC has a lot of like pretty weak cards because of the treasure map things. Like, the treasure map cards are pretty weak in general. The only good cards are the ones like the Treasure Seeker we'll get to, because this just floods your deck with a whole bunch of treasures. But the other ones that just give you like 1 treasure or something here or there, they're really bad, because the treasures aren't even that fantastic. We'll get to the treasures in a bit. Seek Shelter, though, is actually a pretty great card. This is 1 cost, 3 forest, and you get to discover a taunt creature and give it 3 extra life. That's super solid. You get some really good creatures out of it, and then you get a 3 life buff just for the cost of 1. And the fact you get to choose is amazing. Like, you can get Ice Rock Behemoth off of this, which is insane for green. Like, Ice Rock Behemoth is always the insane card from Discover, because blue-red sucks. And getting access to Ice Rock as a neutral card is pretty insane. This is the Tiki guy that lets you discover a beast. I think that's pretty solid. Kind of a B tier. Again, largely because the reason you get to pick, and largely because the reason you get Ice Rock Behemoth from this, it's pretty decent. It's not like amazing, but it gives you a collector, and then you get to discover a beast to fit your situation. So you can also get like Salamander, Crackthorn. There's a lot of beasts that are pretty reasonable, so I think B tier is fine for that. This card's not as good. This is Thyrian Expedition. I think this is a C tier. It's okay, but it's just kind of land heavy. Like, it costs 2 forests, 2 lakes, which is quite pricey. Generally with these Discover cards, like the Discover cards are really good because you can have any land combination. Like, it is usually really cheap. Like, this guy is 2 forest, Barter is 2 deserts, but this card is 4 land, which you could probably play a lot of the cards you get from this anyways. The other issue with this card is that the card pool for this is a lot higher. So this allows you to get any cards with 4 land or higher, which is a huge pool of cards. So with the beasts, you're really restricted to only the beasts, and there's quite a few decent beasts out there, but this just gives you such a wide variety of cards to pick from, and that's what makes it a lot worse as well. And now we're on to Crystal Spice, and this card is pretty good. I think this is a B tier as well. Again, largely because blue-red is just not a very good archetype. So I think this is a pretty solid B tier though. It adds a lot of value to Rakoan decks. This is definitely better over here. This is like a high B. Because it's random, it's Discover, you can like just flop and get some not so great cards, but like for low deck weight decks like Rakoans, it's really strong. You can get like Meteor for Rakoans, which was just ridiculous. But because of the randomness factor, I think I'm gonna keep it at B. It might be an A, I'm not sure, maybe we'll come back to it. Gave you Runin several times. This guy? Yeah, Runin is reasonable off of this sometimes as well. Sorocco, I love this card, but sadly I think this is more of like a C tier. Once again, because of the red-blue archetype. So I know, so there's two like reasonably solid cards in the red-blue archetype here that I've just stated, but these two cards need some extra backup. Like, Crystal Spice isn't even run in blue-red decks usually. This is run in Rakoans, decks with small deck weight. And Sorocco here is just not fitting in any decent archetypes. Like, I built my blue-red bloated toad list, which it was pretty solid in, but like, I don't know, that deck as a whole was just kind of okay. I think that deck I made was more like CB tier anyways. So Sorocco's just, it struggles a lot. It's really land heavy, it's expensive. It works with Mistral Guide okay, but yeah. And then onto the God, I don't know any of these guys' names. He's the glider. Glidehopper, that's what his name is. So Glidehopper is a worse Oversky tow ship, but still pretty solid. I think he deserves a B slot. Flying and jump is pretty reasonable, but the fact that he only has 4 life and he costs 5 can hurt him just slightly. But pretty solid B tier, I think. Probably better than the Adventurer. Spirit Spice is really good. This will be an A tier for sure. So it's 9 cost, and then every creature that dies this turn reduces the cost by 3. It gives +3/+3, charge 3, and flying. So you can easily reduce this to 0 cost in like sacrifice sort of oriented decks. So it's just free stats, free charge 3, flying. It's pretty amazing. It's only okay with movement, carpet, treasure. Yeah, Sorocco needs a lot of synergistic cards to make him function, and that's one of the issues with him. He just needs too much to make him work. It's like combo in a way. When he works, he's amazing though. So if you have like a greedy sort of list, he's pretty amazing. But I mean, if you're already greeding that hard to try and make him work, you might as well just play a different greedy list that is just simply better. Really unfortunate, because he has so much potential, but yeah, gotta be slotted at C tier. Shifting Tides triggers effect. Yeah, so if you guys don't know, Sorocco can be triggered by land movement, like Shifting Tide and Sunken Tower, but the issue, again, is just that he's so land heavy. Like 6 lands in the red-blue archetype just isn't gonna get you very far, unfortunately. Like the only other cards that you want to go up to 6 lands for are the Gemshell Tortoise, which isn't a very good card either. So like, yeah, it's just a big issue that he's 6 land cost. If he was less land, like if he was like 5 land, I think it would actually be a pretty good card. But like 6 lands makes him, it just puts him quite out of reach. Not very good. Airbot is amazing. I almost want to slot this in S tier if I'm being honest. I almost want to slot this in S tier. But I think he's... Yeah, we got Detonate up next. Yeah, Detonate's the definite S tier. So Airbot is just really amazing. He's 2 cost. Flying 2, dash 2, 2/2 body, you can just dash him off to the opposite sides of the wells and immediately get double collection without ever having to invest lands there. So you can throw this off to the opposite side of the board while you try and fight your opponent's side, and then you got just pretty much a free double collector. You didn't have to invest anything. Your opponent has to invest like a 2 Faeria removal card on this, which you just trade evenly, and if they don't have the immediate answer, you already collect 2 Faeria with this back, which is just absolutely insane. Airbot's a incredible card. Is this S tier? It's really good. Yeah, we might come back to this, I don't know. Detonate, of course, is really amazing too. So this card does 2 damage to everything, or each mech does 2 damage to everything around it, which is ridiculous for 2 cost. S tier when with Detonate. Yeah, Airbot also is really strong with Detonate because, again, you can just drop this anywhere, deal 2 damage around surrounding it. But that's mostly the Detonate card that is doing it, right? I mean, yeah, there's synergy there, right? Yeah, I guess with Detonate in the game, we can safely put this at S tier. Even without Detonate, it's still a pretty solid card. Like, even without Detonate, I would consider putting this at S tier, but sure. I think with the Detonate in existence, it definitely wants to go S. We'll put it there for now. The Fragmenter, this is probably C tier. It's reasonable. It's not that reasonable. It's like, it's 6 cost for a 3/6 with combat. I guess it's like reasonable. 6 cost, 6 life, but it's still quite expensive. Pretty difficult to get reasonable combat triggers off of this, and it's got no mobility attached to it, so your opponent can pretty easily maneuver around this. And if every tile around this card is blocked, then you don't actually get the combat trigger off of this guy. So he can be quite a liability sometimes. But yeah, he's probably on the level of like the Kodama. Kodama's probably a bit better. Junkfeet, really great. This is a A tier card. I don't think I need to say much about this. It gives 1/1 stats to every mech on the board. It's pretty crazy. Definitely an A tier card. This guy is another C tier. Probably a little better than Fragmenter. Just because it's cheaper. So one of the issues with this card is that it's still expensive at 5 cost for a 2/5 body that you can immediately play down. Or what I mean is that it doesn't have an immediate effect. It's a 2/5 body, and you gotta wait 1 turn for it to get any stats, which is a little bit awkward. Once it gets those stats, it's okay. It's like a 5/5 for 5, but it's only okay. Sadly, like, the mechs, like, there's a lot of, like, okay mechs, but, like, Detonate just throws that sort of mech deck over the edge. Mapdealer, really great. This is an A tier card. Probably up here. A 0-cost 0/1 just to collect for you. I mean, you can pair this with, like, Aurora or, like, Phantasm as well. It's just a free body. It's also really low deck weight, so you can add, like, a lot of heavy deck weight cards in the deck. Early game can improve the Unforged. The Forgeling. Yeah, I mean, even if you get this in the early game, though, it's still incredibly expensive. Like, 5 cost just for a collector. Like, in the early game, it has an awkward place because it's such an expensive collector. The mid game is awkward because you don't want to play this into range of any creatures. The late game, it's even worse. It's just got a really awkward spot all around. Amai Merchant needs removing from the game. Yes, Amai Merchant is quite the problem. And this is debatably S tier as well. But it's also quite random. I think, honestly, it can go S tier. It's ridiculous. Like, sometimes this can brick you because you just don't get the right cards from it, and you give your opponents really good cards. I don't know, with the Husk nerf, this might just be I don't know. The thing is that it's a 3/3 flying body for 3, which is already super good, but then it's got this ridiculous effect on it as well that can allow the yellow player to get access to Firestorm, or Bomb Slinger, or Phantasm, or Soul Eater, or Frog Tosser. Anything that yellow could possibly want, it can have in its card pool. Honestly, this is S. Oh, until this is changed, I want this to be an S tier. People need to know that this card is devastating in the game. Probably S tier though, I really hate it so much. Yeah, like, there is some biasisms that's forcing me to put Amai Merchant up here, just because it's, yeah, like, it's randomized, which makes it super strong sometimes, but super bad other times. But even when it's mildly bad, it's not even that bad. So it feels awkward to put it at S tier just because it's got some weaknesses to it. But those weaknesses aren't as likely as the benefits to this card. Like, the weaknesses is only once in a while. Like, once in a while you might get a bad pull from the Discover mechanics. But I think like 80% of the time it's going to be super OP. So it's going to be low end of S tier for me. Aryana, I think, is going to be like a high B for me. So this card's a 4/2 that keeps repetitively coming back to your hand, which is okay because it's like, it's kind of like card draw, or it's kind of like, it just feeds you creatures over and over, which is reasonably nice, but the creature is really expensive. 4 cost for a 4/2. Like, I'd rather play an air elemental and actually get some useful effect, because the treasure is really slow. It's pretty solid in decks that you want to have low deck weight on, though. And especially, like, I run this in my yellow flyers list simply because there's no other yellow flyers I really want. Like, Air Ellie, I mean, I guess I run this over Air Ellie. Yeah, I run this over Air Ellie, I suppose. Fair enough. But still a B tier. I mean, it's really expensive. Like, you can just do a 2 Faeria removal card on this, and then it dies. The treasures aren't really something to consider with this. They're just kind of a nice bonus at the end, but you need a deck to actually synergize with, like, having low deck weight and being able to repetitively play this. But yeah. Aryana's amazing if you can afford it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about amazing. I'd say he's on the level of good if you can afford it, but maybe decent. But he's just really expensive to repetitively replay. And yeah, the treasure is not really something to consider because you have to play this 3 times to get the treasure. And that's like 12 Faeria investment. Very good in certain situations, like against mono green where they don't have good answers to 2 life creatures. It's quite good there. But it's kind of like half and half matchups there. Barter is very good. I'm going to put this at A, like a high A. So Barter gives you access to, like, I don't know, any removal card that you could possibly want a lot of the times. But sometimes you run into an opponent who doesn't really have that useful of events. Like, if you run into, I don't know, what is this not useful against? Some people like tech decks to fight against Barter. Like green-yellow sack, this isn't going to be useful at all against, usually. Or other creature-based decks. Like mono-green Beastmaster, typically, that just runs, like, Feed the Forests. Feed is usually not very good for you. And it can brick sometimes. But really solid card overall. Like, Merchant is going to be a lot better than this. But Discover as a mechanic is really annoying to play against, especially at a competitive level, because when you deal with random RNG cards like this, a competitive player has to play around every possible outcome, which means you have to play around every possible amazing outcome, which there are many with these Discover cards. But the player who is playing Discover is going to have to play around every bad outcome, which is going to be some really bad options. So it makes Discover a really annoying mechanic in competitive games like this, because it's just never good for any player. It's never fun for any player. Like, the player playing against this has to play against the good options. The player playing with this has to play against the bad option, play around the bad options. It's really unfortunate. Aryana stops fatigue damage if you manage to kill it every turn. Yeah, it's a okay answer to, like, stop fatigue and such. Pretty solid B tier though. Celeste is gonna be a meme for me. Celeste is pretty awful. The one card archetype, what is that called? It's like a Highlander. I think that's what it's called. The Highlander sort of archetype is just not good. Like, in games like this, having the option to build 3 copies of a card is insane, because you can just dump 3 times copies of the best cards in the game. And we just don't have enough cards in the game to have enough good cards to make a singleton deck like this. Not to mention, like, even with a singleton deck, Celeste isn't even that amazing. Like, it's 10 Faeria, 6/6 protection, haste, charge 2. It's okay, but it's not even, like, that good. So, like, he just really suffers. It's so annoying being killed by your own cards. Yeah. Yeah, and this is why Discover is just such a toxic mechanic. And, like, so things like Seek Shelter, where it doesn't really break the color, and so, like, with Seek Shelter, this card, you're just trying to find big stuff. That's the entire purpose of running this card, is finding big stuff. So, like, it doesn't, like, the randomness doesn't really matter that much. You're just trying to find big stuff from it, which every card is going to be big stuff because of the 3 life buff. So, like, this card is absolutely fine, because the randomness doesn't even matter anymore. The beast ones are okay. They're still a little annoying because they have some randomness elements to it, but I think Seek Shelter is one of the most balanced Discover cards in the game, to be honest. Alright, so Compass of Gagana. I never play this card. The treasure archetype is already, like, just not great. So this is gonna be C tier for me. Because it's okay, like, with treasure type of things, but it like, the treasure archetype as a whole just sucks. Like, the only good treasure cards are the ones that accidentally give you treasures, like Aryana, which, like, you run Aryana for the deck weight and the replayability. You don't run this for the treasures. The treasures are just, like, an accidental, oh, that's nice, I get a treasure from this eventually. Or, like, the Mapdealer, they're, like, accidental treasure givers. But the cards that are actually built around giving you treasures aren't very good. The only exception is going to be Message in a Bottle, because this has really good event synergy. But yeah, most of the treasure cards just suck. This guy, though, is really good. This is the Gagana Treasure Seeker. This is going to be A tier for me. Probably up here somewhere. Because if you have a full hand and you get, like, 8 treasures from this, that's just pretty solid. You're almost guaranteed 1 treasure from this. And the treasure cards are pretty good. The only issue is that the cards that give you treasures suck. But the fact that this immediately gives you 1 treasure, like, off the bat, almost guaranteed, makes it pretty good. And then a 3/6 body is pretty reasonable. For 6 cost, plus the treasure, pretty reasonable. Yeah. So this card is Shara's Inspiration. So this card's been changed, and some of the sites that you look on won't have the updated version of this card. This is a 2-cost neutral card, 4 lands, and it gives +1/+1 buffs to a creature for every enemy creature that's surrounding it. This is really bad. This is going to be D tier. This guy's probably a bit better. So this card is just super land heavy, and the buffs are really difficult to apply anyways. You might as well just run the neutral adventurer guy that does the same sort of ability. because he just gets better stats off of it, and he costs no lands. Shara's Inspiration is really difficult to make work. Alright, so this is good for this one. Let's move on to the treasures. So, the reason I'm separating these is because it's really difficult to rank these alongside normal cards because of the way that you get treasure maps. Treasure maps are just gotten in so many various ways. So for example, like, if your prime way of getting treasure maps is these really terrible cards, like the 4/5 shell guy or something, if your primary way is getting them through those terrible cards, then these treasures power level drops significantly because you had to work so hard to get these. But if you play like a card like the bird ship, and you're not really spending a lot of effort to get these treasures, then their power level increases. So it really all depends on what methods you use to get these treasures, which is why I'm ranking them separately, because they really need to be ranked relative to each other rather than relative to the rest of the cards in the game. So anyways, without further ado, this card, compared to the other cards, is pretty memey. I have only ever picked this card once in my entire playthrough of Faeria, and that was only because I was like extremely ahead and I had like a ton of treasure maps in my deck, and it was a decent play for the turn, but I was already like winning the game at that point. Other opportunities, I will never pick this card because it just deletes your treasure maps and just gives you a, an okay creature. It's not even that great. Chrysalis is pretty decent. I think we're going to put this at B tier. Again, you have to keep in mind that this tier list system here is going to be a lot different from the regular tier list system I've been running. So while this is a very good card, relative to the other cards, I think it's quite a B tier type of card. Key of... Oh god, which one is which? This is Key of Elements, this is Key of Giants. So, Key of Elements is the one that lets you discover a card of a chosen color, and it costs 3 less. Key of Giants over here is the one that costs 3, and then you discover a random card from a color, and it gains +3/+3. So this card, I think, is A tier. Really strong. I mean, you get a discounted creature that costs, like a creature that costs 3 less. That's quite solid. Key of Giants is less good. I think this is more a B tier. This is just really expensive. Sorry, does this give +3/+3 or +6/+6? Key of... yeah, Key of the Giants gives +6/+6. Okay. So... yeah, +6/+6 is okay, but like the extra Faeria cost can be a little bit expensive, so I think this goes to B tier. This is the Spear, the Divine Spear or something like that. It's a 1-cost 9/1 with dash. It's got Divine, so your opponents can't answer it at all. This is like S tier, I think. 1 Faeria for a 9 damage thing is pretty solid. The only thing this is, well, maybe this is A. I mean, this is weak to like Ground Shaker, or if they can use mobility tricks to get a small creature to kill this off. It's quite frail, but it presents a huge amount of damage. So you can often spend 1 Faeria to like kill a big threat or present 9 damage to their face or something. Is the wrong card? Is not the Spear. Oh, sorry, this is not the Spear. Thanks, guys. These treasures are... yeah, that guy's the Spear. Okay. Thanks for that catch. This is not the Spear. This is the Taunt guys. So this is 7 cost, and you get to summon 2 5/5s with Taunt and Divine. I mean, it's also pretty solid. Probably A tier, but maybe a little bit below this one. This one is nice. I mean, it's just kind of the same value as like Phantasm in some ways, but like Divine's pretty solid for it. Taunt, you can save your face a lot of times with this card. Pretty reasonable card. Magic Carpet, of course, is S tier. This card is ridiculously strong and in dire need of a nerf. Like, this just sets the power level off of the rest of the treasures so much. Like, you pair this with if you pair this with Disciple, you immediately win the game. You pair this with anything else, you probably win the game, as long as you have hand space, and your hand's not flooding from like a Husk player or something. Just filling your hand with Flash Winds is ridiculously strong. Simulacrum is insane. I think this is A tier. Like it's not comparable to the Magic Carpet. So that's a high A tier. We might actually drop this, considering that this is here in A tier. Actually, considering how these other cards are turning out, we might drop these to C, drop this to B. I kind of like that. So Spear of Guardians, this is going to be like A tier. Yeah. Pretty solid card. I think Simulacrum's a little better. I mean, it depends. Like, this is just so cheap. And Tyrion Globe, definitely S tier. So I think we're just going to move this up to D, and this will be our tier list here. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. These two cards are really OP. So the Tyrion Globe is a 5/5, charge 5 for 3 cost, and then when it dies, it does 5 damage to everything around it. So for 3 Faeria, you can deal like 10 damage pretty reasonably. And your opponent has to invest a lot to kill that 5 life creature as well. So like, you know, similar damage as the spear, but it can often survive a lot longer than the spear can. But yeah, that's gonna be it for the Chronicles of Gagana tier list. So thanks for watching, guys. Hey guys, it's Moon from the future. I just realized that I forgot to go back on some of these things, like the Airbot. I wanted to go back on and just double check and such. I also got some comments from the community giving some suggestions that I very much agreed with, so we're just gonna go quickly in here and edit. Airbot, I realized that I wanted to actually drop down to A tier. This isn't like an auto-include in every deck, as strong as it is. The other card that somebody pointed out and convinced me is the Merchant. I think I was quite hasty in putting it up in S tier. I would like to drop this back down to A. I just have a lot of, I don't know, PTSD maybe from these Merchant matches that I've run into. But it is only about maybe a 75% chance that you get a really OP card from this, and then the other 25% is it might brick you, which it's really not S tier material when we're considering it that way. It's not always an auto-include in Husk lists also, so I think A tier is a lot more reasonable, as OP as I think it is. Also, Message in a Bottle, I wanted to personally drop down to B tier. I did say that this is great in events list, but I realized that events lists are not really A tier deck material. They're more of a B tier deck to begin with, so I think this needs to go down here in B tier. Additionally, I think Lizard suggested to drop this guy. This is the Spirit Spice. And I think I agree with this, just because, yeah, I really haven't played around with this card a lot, but I realized that the triggers are kind of difficult to get off sometimes. You need a deck really tailored around this card, and Sack at the moment, green-yellow Sack, is not the strongest in the meta, so I think B tier is perfectly reasonable for that. Also, I was a little bit too harsh on Fugoro. We're going to boost him up to C tier. He's pretty reasonable. Some people were suggesting to bump this guy up. I'm unsure about that. This guy is still C tier to me, just because he gets overruled by a lot of other creatures in the game. It's pretty reasonable, but I think, like, honestly, C tier cards are pretty playable, but I think it's more C tier. And the other two I wanted to change were these two guys. The Exotic Pet just doesn't have enough pressure to really apply much presence on the board, so we're going to slot you down to C. This was another suggestion by the community. I believe Cheese suggested that, and this guy down as well. So this guy is kind of similar to this guy. Like, it's a little bit expensive, and you don't always see this card because it's just difficult to make it work. But I think this is a reasonable C tier, maybe like the highest of the C's. Someone also suggested to raise Sorocco up, but I just think that, again, as I mentioned earlier, Blue-red is just a really difficult archetype, especially at 6 lands, so we're going to keep you there. And I think this is what I'll be happy with. This is going to be my finalized tier list for the Chronicles of Gagana. So again, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys can join me in the next one.